Ethan Cole had never imagined that a routine exploration mission could end like this. The vast emptiness of space had always been a place of wonder to him, a canvas for human curiosity and ingenuity. Yet, as his shuttle plummeted toward the uncharted exoplanet, he felt nothing but fear and disbelief. The controls were unresponsive, sparks flew across the console, and alarms screamed in his ears. In the final moments before impact, Ethan braced himself, hoping that if nothing else, his body might survive. The crash was violent but mercifully brief. When Ethan opened his eyes, he found himself lying among the jagged rocks and bioluminescent flora of a strange, colorful world. The air was breathable, though it carried a sweet, earthy scent that made him cough and gag momentarily. The sky above was a swirl of deep purples and reds, dotted with two suns casting long, angled shadows across the terrain. It was beautiful, alien, and frightening all at once. Struggling to his feet, Ethan surveyed the area. His shuttle was shattered beyond repair, scattered in a twisted heap of metal and smoldering wires. He knew immediately that there was no way to call for help. He was stranded, alone. It did not take long for Ethan to notice signs of life. Movement caught his eye near a crystalline grove. Shapes that were humanoid in form, yet unlike anything he had ever seen, appeared through the shimmering light. He squinted, his heart beating faster, and saw them, a group of alien women. Their skin shimmered with faint, iridescent patterns that seemed to shift as they moved. Their eyes were large and luminous, reflecting the twin suns above, and their postures radiated authority and caution. Ethan stepped forward cautiously, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Hello?" he called out in English, though he doubted they could understand him. He remembered the universal translator in his suit, but it had been damaged in the crash. The words fell on deaf ears. The alien women exchanged glances, their expressions cool and unreadable. It became clear that they did not welcome him. One of them, taller than the rest and with deep azure markings across her skin, stepped forward. She raised her hand and the others immediately froze. Ethan sensed that any sudden movement could provoke a negative reaction. "I mean no harm," he said, though the words felt fragile in the heavy silence. They did not respond. Instead, they gestured for him to follow. Reluctantly, he complied, knowing resistance would only make matters worse. The aliens led him to a small settlement nestled in the crystalline groves. The buildings were elegant and organic, seemingly grown rather than built, with smooth curves and translucent walls that glowed faintly from within. There was a quiet hum in the air, as if the settlement itself was alive. Once inside, Ethan realized that the alien women had set strict boundaries. He was assigned a small area near the outskirts of the village, separated from their main living quarters. The isolation was deliberate, and he understood that he was being kept under watch. The women observed him from a distance, their gazes sharp and assessing. Any mistake, any sign of aggression or disrespect would surely earn their disapproval. Days passed. Ethan quickly discovered that survival on this planet required more than just basic human ingenuity. The flora and fauna were unlike anything he had encountered. Plants glowed faintly at night, some emitting soft pulses of light, while others produced scents that were intoxicating or disorienting. The local wildlife ranged from gentle, grazing creatures with translucent hides to agile predators that moved in shadows, though none dared approach the settlement itself. Ethan began to learn through observation. He noted the routines of the alien women, how they gathered food, communicated, and maintained their environment. He saw that their society was highly organized, and their intelligence was formidable. They had technologies and methods that were unfamiliar to him, yet remarkably efficient. Despite the initial hostility, Ethan felt a sense of awe. These beings were not monsters as he had feared. They were proud, capable, and protective of their world. The first real interaction came unexpectedly. One of the women, who had been watching him more closely than the others, approached with a container of strange, luminescent fruit. She placed it near his quarters and stepped back, her eyes studying him intently. Ethan hesitated, unsure whether to take it. He smiled gently and nodded his thanks, careful to avoid gestures that might be misinterpreted. The small act did not go unnoticed. While she did not speak or make any sound he could understand, the gesture signaled the faintest opening. Ethan realized that patience would be his greatest ally. He could not force acceptance, he could only earn it. In the following weeks, he began contributing in small ways. He repaired broken water channels, learning from the women's methods and adding slight improvements of his own. He cleaned areas that had been neglected and helped organize supplies. At first, the alien women watched with suspicion, but gradually their demeanor softened. They observed his dedication and began to acknowledge his presence without outright hostility. One day, while exploring the crystalline groves, Ethan noticed a young creature trapped under a fallen branch. It struggled weakly, its translucent body shimmering in distress. Instinctively, he rushed to help, lifting the branch with careful precision. The creature scuttled away, unharmed, leaving Ethan with a sense of accomplishment and relief. Later, the taller woman with azure markings approached him. She spoke for the first time in a language he could not comprehend. Her tone was firm but not angry. She gestured toward the grove, then toward Ethan, as if communicating approval. It was the first recognition he had received, a subtle acknowledgement that he had the potential to contribute meaningfully. Days turned into months, and months into years. Ethan's life became one of quiet diligence and observation. He learned the alien language through gestures, repeated words, and patient mimicry. He began to understand their social structures, the importance of honor, and the ways they valued intelligence and loyalty. Every interaction, no matter how small, became a lesson in humility and respect. Though the alien women still held on to past mistrust, a slow transformation was taking place. Ethan was no longer just a stranger in their midst. He became a figure of reliability, someone who could be counted on during emergencies or daily tasks. His ingenuity and empathy became evident in ways that words could not express. One evening, as the twin suns set and bathed the crystalline structures in soft pink and gold light, Ethan stood on a ridge overlooking the settlement. The alien women moved gracefully below, their patterns shimmering in the fading light. He realized how far he had come, from a terrified survivor of a crash to a trusted presence in an alien society. Yet he knew the journey was far from over. The real test lay not in survival, but in earning their lasting trust and belonging. For now, Ethan allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought of Earth, of the people he had left behind, and of the unknown future that awaited him on this alien world. He understood that his mission had changed. It was no longer about exploration or adventure. It was about connection, understanding, and proving the worth of humanity in a place where he was completely alone. And so, beneath the twin suns and amidst the glowing flora, Ethan continued his careful, patient work. Each day was a step toward acceptance, each gesture a bridge between worlds. The alien women who had once hated him were slowly beginning to see not just a human, but someone who respected their world, their culture, and their lives. Ethan did not know when or if he would be fully accepted. But in the quiet moments of observation, learning, and small acts of kindness, he discovered something profoundly human: the power to persist, adapt, and inspire trust even in the most alien of circumstances. And for the first time since the crash, he allowed himself a quiet hope that one day these alien women would see him not as a stranger, but as someone who belonged. Time on the alien world became a quiet rhythm for Ethan Cole. Each day followed a pattern, Yet no 2 days were exactly alike. The seasons of the planet shifted slowly, bathing the crystalline groves in changing hues of light. The alien women, though still cautious, began to acknowledge his presence with small gestures, a nod, a glance, a brief smile. These gestures, however subtle, fueled Ethan's determination. One morning, he awoke to find the taller woman with the azure markings watching him from a distance. She had taken to observing him closely, as if trying to understand his intentions. Ethan greeted her with a slight bow, a gesture he had learned signified respect. She inclined her head slightly, then turned away. It was not friendship, but it was not hostility either. Ethan had begun to understand the importance of contribution in their society. They valued action over words, and thoughtfulness over pride. He noticed a recurring problem in their settlement. The water channels that carried the streams from nearby crystalline springs were inefficient. During certain times of the planet's slow seasons, the water would not reach the furthest dwellings, leaving some areas dry while others flooded. Ethan decided to help. He spent days observing the flow, sketching patterns in the soft, glowing sand, and testing small adjustments using stones, plant fibers, and some materials salvaged from his shuttle. The alien women watched silently, curious but wary. Finally, after several attempts, the channels redirected the water evenly across the settlement. No one spoke at first, but a subtle wave of acknowledgement passed through the observers. They did not smile, but their posture relaxed, and some began adjusting small elements of the system themselves, following his ideas. This small success marked the first real shift in the women's perception. They began to see that Ethan was not merely surviving, but actively improving life for everyone. The taller woman approached him again that evening. She did not speak, but she handed him a small bundle of luminous fruits, a gesture that clearly indicated thanks. Ethan accepted them with a humble nod, careful not to overstep. As weeks turned into months, Ethan found other ways to contribute. The alien women cultivated food using methods that were effective but limited in scale. Ethan suggested simple improvements, stacking plant supports differently to maximize sunlight, creating basic tools to reduce manual effort, and combining different plant types to yield more nutritious food. At first, the women experimented cautiously. Then slowly, they began to follow his suggestions. The breakthrough came during a storm. Heavy rains from one of the planet's twin moons caused flash floods in the lower parts of the crystalline groves. Ethan noticed early signs of water overflow and quickly alerted the nearby women. Though they could not understand his words, his urgent gestures and actions spoke volumes. Together they worked to redirect the water using the channels Ethan had improved. By the time the storm ended, the settlement had suffered no damage. The women, exhausted but relieved, looked at Ethan differently. No words were spoken, but their gazes conveyed recognition and respect. He had proven himself in a situation that required initiative, intelligence, and courage. From that day, Ethan felt a subtle but unmistakable change in the atmosphere. The women were beginning to see him not as a stranger, but as someone who could be trusted. Months became years. Ethan adapted to the rhythms of the planet and the settlement. He learned to read the subtle cues of the alien language, understanding tones and gestures that conveyed meaning beyond words. He discovered a particular joy in teaching, guiding younger women in tasks and sharing knowledge without imposing his own methods. His contributions were met with increasing acceptance. Small groups would work alongside him willingly, no longer under supervision, but out of genuine cooperation. The alien women began to include him in decisions about resource management, infrastructure improvements, and even cultural projects. They shared stories of their history and values, revealing a deep respect for community, intelligence, and creativity. Ethan listened, learned, and adapted his ideas to fit their needs rather than imposing his own. He realized that true respect was earned not by doing everything perfectly, but by showing humility, empathy, and patience. One day, while exploring the crystalline forest beyond the settlement, Ethan stumbled upon a rare plant that could purify water naturally. Excited, he brought samples back to the settlement. The women examined it with interest, fascinated by his discovery. With their guidance, he learned how to cultivate it and integrate it into their water system. The innovation improved the settlement's water quality dramatically. It was not just practical contributions that helped him gain trust. Ethan had a gentle way with the creatures of the planet. One afternoon, he found a wounded animal trapped under a fallen branch. Its translucent skin was cracked, and it moved weakly. Ethan lifted the branch and comforted the creature until it could move on. The alien women noticed, impressed not by strength, but by his compassion. Over time, Ethan formed bonds with several of the women individually. They would talk in gestures and sounds, sharing ideas about food cultivation, architecture, and the natural world. Some would show him aspects of their culture reserved for those they trusted. While he remained respectful, he felt a growing sense of belonging. He was no longer just a visitor. He was becoming part of their society. One evening, the taller woman with the azure markings led him to a high ridge overlooking the settlement. The twin suns were setting, casting the crystalline structures in gold and purple light. She gestured to the settlement, then to Ethan, and finally made a circular motion with her hands, as if enclosing him within their community. Ethan understood instantly. It was an acknowledgement of inclusion, of acceptance. The word ours had not been spoken, but its meaning was clear. Ethan's heart swelled with quiet gratitude. He knew the journey was far from complete, but this small recognition was monumental. It symbolized the beginning of trust and mutual respect. He felt a deeper connection to the alien women, one based not on dominance or power, but on shared effort, understanding, and care. Life continued with steady progress. The settlement thrived under a combination of traditional methods and Ethan's subtle innovations. Crops grew more abundant, water systems became more reliable, and creatures moved freely without fear of human interference. The alien women began to include him in daily routines, sharing meals and participating in communal tasks together. Their previous resentment softened into camaraderie, and camaraderie slowly blossomed into something deeper, a sense of shared identity. Ethan often reflected on his journey. When he first arrived, the alien women had regarded him with suspicion, even hostility. They had made it clear that he was not welcome. Yet, through persistence, patience, and empathy, he had transformed that perception. He realized that human qualities, ingenuity, kindness, and humility, were powerful tools even in the most alien environments. The young women in the settlement began to look up to him as a mentor. He guided them in practical skills, shared knowledge about the natural world, and encouraged them to experiment with new ideas. The older women, once wary of his presence, now sought his input in community decisions. He had earned their trust not through force, but through consistent, thoughtful action. One day, a minor emergency tested the bonds he had formed. A sudden shift in the crystalline terrain caused a small landslide near the edge of the settlement. Ethan reacted immediately, directing the women to safety and using his knowledge of the terrain to prevent further damage. They worked together efficiently, and the crisis passed with minimal disruption. Afterward, the women acknowledged his leadership with gestures of approval and quiet smiles. It was a silent affirmation. He was no longer an outsider. By the 10th year, Ethan had become indispensable to the settlement. His skills, knowledge, and empathy had woven him into the fabric of their society. The alien women, once hostile and distant, now called him a part of their community. He was respected, trusted, and even affectionately regarded. The term ours began to circulate quietly among them, a word of belonging and acceptance. Ethan often thought back to the day of the crash, when he had been alone, scared, and uncertain of his survival. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but each step had been meaningful. He had learned to observe, to listen, and to act with patience and respect. In doing so, he had discovered the true power of humanity, not through force or dominance, but through understanding, ingenuity, and care for others. As he stood atop the ridge once more, watching the twin suns dip below the horizon, Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He was not just surviving, he was thriving. He had transformed fear and mistrust into trust, curiosity into collaboration, and distance into connection. The alien women who had once hated him now regarded him as one of their own. And though he knew that life on this planet would always hold challenges, he also knew that together they could face anything. Trust had been earned, bonds had been formed, and a new chapter of life had begun, one where humanity's spirit of empathy and ingenuity had left a mark on an alien world, and where Ethan had found a place to belong. Ethan Cole had spent nearly a decade on the alien planet, and the landscape of his life had shifted in ways he had never imagined. What had begun as fear, isolation, and mistrust had slowly grown into something much more meaningful, a place where he belonged. The alien women who had once regarded him with suspicion now included him in their daily lives, sought his guidance in practical matters, and shared moments of quiet companionship. He had become part of their world, yet he remained humble, aware that true belonging required constant effort, understanding, and respect. The settlement thrived. The innovations Ethan had introduced over the years, improved water channels, optimized food cultivation, and the careful integration of natural purification plants had transformed life for the women. Crops flourished in abundance, the small crystalline homes were well maintained, and the once precarious water system flowed steadily. More importantly, the alien women had begun to trust him, not merely as a helper or a problem solver, but as a member of their community. It was during one of the planet's long seasons, when the twin suns hung high in the sky and the crystalline structures shimmered with refracted light, that Ethan truly felt the depth of this acceptance. A festival was held, a celebration of the planet's growth cycles, and he had been invited to participate fully, a rare honor for someone who had once been considered an outsider. The festival was a vibrant display of light, music, and coordinated movement, with women moving gracefully among the luminous flora, their skin patterns shifting in harmony with the celebration. Ethan observed and learned, understanding the rhythms, the gestures, and the subtle meanings behind each action. When the time came for him to contribute, he did so carefully. He helped organize a sequence of water lights, streams of glowing liquid that traced paths across the settlement, reflecting the beauty of the crystals and illuminating the dancers. The women responded with quiet smiles and nods of approval. It was a small act, yet it symbolized something far greater: inclusion, trust, and shared creativity. Over time, Ethan had begun to mentor younger women in practical skills. He taught them how to combine the natural resources of the planet to improve farming efficiency, how to read the subtle changes in weather patterns, and how to maintain the delicate balance of the settlement's structures. These lessons were not just about survival, they were about understanding the planet, working with it rather than against it, and building a life that respected both its beauty and its dangers. The students looked up to him not only for his knowledge, but for his humility, patience, and gentle guidance. The older women, who had once been wary of his presence, had begun to seek his counsel. They approached him when decisions needed to be made about resource allocation, settlement expansion, or the care of injured creatures. Ethan listened, asked questions, and offered suggestions in ways that respected their authority and culture. He learned that leadership was not about control, it was about understanding, communication, and contributing to the greater good. One morning, a group of women approached him with concern. A rare plant that served as a natural source of light for the settlement was struggling to grow. The women had tried their usual methods, but nothing worked. Ethan knelt beside the plants, studying their roots, the soil, and the sunlight patterns. Carefully, he adjusted the soil, added small amounts of water from a purified stream, and repositioned the plants for optimal sunlight. Within days, the plants began to thrive. The women observed the transformation in quiet amazement, and one of the elders touched Ethan's arm gently, a sign of gratitude and trust that spoke volumes. Despite the many successes, challenges remained. The alien planet was beautiful but unpredictable. Sudden storms, shifting terrain, and unknown creatures tested the settlement regularly. Ethan learned to anticipate problems and work collaboratively with the women to address them. Each challenge strengthened the bonds between them. Trust grew not in moments of calm, but in the way they faced difficulties together, pooling knowledge, skill, and care. One day, while exploring the outer ridges of the settlement, Ethan discovered a hidden grove of luminous flowers that glowed in delicate blues and purples. He brought samples back to the community, and the women were fascinated. Together, they experimented with the flowers, learning how to cultivate them and incorporate their light into the settlement's daily life. The success of this project reinforced a fundamental truth Ethan had come to understand. Human ingenuity, when combined with respect for alien culture and nature, could achieve remarkable outcomes. The relationship between Ethan and the taller woman with azure markings deepened. She began to communicate more openly, using gestures and sounds that conveyed not only instruction, but also emotion. Ethan responded in kind, carefully observing her cues and mirroring them to build understanding. Over time, their interactions became collaborative rather than cautious. They shared moments of quiet observation, studying the stars together, discussing the patterns of the twin suns, and marveling at the life around them. The connection was subtle but profound, a mutual recognition of intellect, dedication, and empathy. The community began to rely on Ethan's insights for longer-term planning. When the women discussed potential expansion into nearby areas, he offered suggestions based on his years of observation and experimentation. He proposed methods to maintain harmony with the local ecosystem, ensuring that any growth would not disrupt the delicate balance of the land. The women considered his ideas seriously, incorporating them into their plans. For the first time, Ethan felt that he was contributing not just as an individual, but as a valued partner in shaping the future of the settlement. Through all of this, Ethan maintained his humility. He never sought to dominate or impress. His goal was always to assist, learn, and adapt. His actions demonstrated a rare quality, the ability to persistently offer value without demanding recognition. This attitude gradually transformed perception. The alien women who had once been cold and distant now included him in discussions, tasks, and even leisure. Laughter began to echo through the settlement, often shared between him and the women as they worked side by side. 10 years had passed since his arrival, and the changes were remarkable. The settlement was thriving, and Ethan had become fully integrated into the community. He was called upon for advice, asked to participate in festivals, and included in strategic planning. The alien women had begun referring to him collectively as ours, a term of belonging and respect that acknowledged his unwavering dedication and integration. Ethan reflected on the journey with quiet pride. He had arrived as a stranded human, uncertain and alone. He had faced hostility, suspicion, and isolation. Yet, through patience, empathy, and consistent effort, he had transformed his position from outsider to essential member of the community. The alien women who had once hated him now regarded him as a part of their family, a friend, and a trusted advisor. Even in moments of stillness, he felt the profound connection that had grown between him and the settlement. Walking through the crystalline groves, he observed the younger women tending to crops he had helped improve, the older women consulting with him on matters of strategy, and the community moving in harmony with the planet's rhythms. He felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that his presence had a lasting positive impact, and that his efforts had been both meaningful and appreciated. Yet, Ethan understood that belonging was not a final state. It was a continual process. He remained attentive, ready to contribute, listen, and adapt as needed. Every gesture of trust he received was a reminder that respect and cooperation were earned daily through action, understanding, and empathy. He also recognized that his own growth had been as significant as the contributions he had made. He had learned patience, humility, and the value of collaboration across cultures and species. One afternoon, the taller woman with the azure markings brought him to a quiet grove near the edge of the settlement. The twin suns were low in the sky, casting long golden reflections across the crystalline structures. She gestured to the entire settlement, then to him, and finally made a circular motion with her hands, enclosing him symbolically. Ethan understood immediately. The gesture meant that he was accepted fully, that he was no longer a visitor or a helper, but a valued part of their society. The word ours carried weight, not just as a declaration of inclusion, but as a recognition of years of effort, respect, and shared experience. As he stood there, taking in the settlement bathed in warm light, Ethan realized how far he had come. The journey had not been easy, and there had been moments of doubt and loneliness. But he had persisted, guided by the principles of empathy, intelligence, and patience. He had proven that humanity's strengths were not just physical or technological, but also moral and intellectual, the ability to connect, understand, and contribute positively, even in the most unfamiliar and challenging environments. The alien women began to involve him in cultural projects as well. They shared stories, songs, and art forms, inviting him to participate in ways that respected their traditions while incorporating his perspective. Ethan listened, learned, and contributed, creating collaborative works that symbolized the union of their experiences and ideas. The settlement became a living testament to cooperation, mutual respect, and the blending of human ingenuity with alien wisdom. Through all of this, Ethan never lost his sense of wonder. Each day brought new discoveries: plants, creatures, weather patterns, and social dynamics. The alien world was endlessly fascinating, and he delighted in learning from it while contributing to its inhabitants' well-being. He understood that knowledge was a shared resource, and the more he shared, the more the community flourished. By the end of the 10th year, Ethan had not only survived, but had thrived. He had grown in understanding, skill, and connection. The alien women who had once been distant and mistrustful now included him in every aspect of life. The term ours was no longer a tentative label. It was a declaration of belonging, of shared responsibility, and of mutual respect. Ethan stood once more on the ridge overlooking the settlement, the twin suns casting long shadows over the crystalline groves. He watched the women move gracefully through their daily tasks, their patterns shimmering in the warm light. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had arrived as a stranger, a human alone on an alien planet. Now, he was part of a community that had become home, a place where intellect, empathy, and persistence had bridged the gap between species, and where trust had been earned through consistent, meaningful action. For Ethan, the lesson was clear. True belonging was not given. It was cultivated. It was nurtured through patience, humility, and a willingness to contribute to the well-being of others. It was demonstrated through understanding, respect, and shared effort. And above all, it was a recognition of the power of humanity not merely to survive, but to inspire, connect, and become a valued part of worlds beyond its own. 10 years had passed since Ethan Cole first crash-landed on the alien planet, and much had changed. Not only the settlement, but himself. What had begun as a struggle to survive had become a journey of belonging, understanding, and purpose. The alien women who had once regarded him with suspicion now called him ours, a word that carried warmth, respect, and recognition. Ethan had become an essential part of their society, and in turn, they had become a second family to him. The settlement thrived as never before. Crops were abundant, and the crystalline homes reflected light in dazzling patterns that brightened the long twin-sun days. Water flowed efficiently through the improved channels, now lined with plants that purified it naturally. The creatures of the planet moved freely and peacefully, no longer fearful of human intervention. Life had grown harmonious, a blend of alien wisdom and Ethan's careful innovations. The women had begun to involve Ethan in projects of cultural significance. Today was one such day. They gathered near a grand plaza where the crystal structures formed a natural amphitheater. Vibrant patterns of light danced across the walls, reflecting the soft hum of energy that seemed alive in every corner. Ethan had been invited to participate in a ceremony celebrating the achievements of the settlement, a rare honor for someone who had once been an outsider. As he stepped forward, the taller woman with the azure markings approached him. She gestured for him to stand beside her, and for the first time, there was no hesitation, no caution in her movements. The other women followed suit, creating a circle that symbolically included him as part of the community. Ethan's heart swelled. The word ours had been spoken quietly in murmurs, but it resonated deeply. It was no longer tentative. It was a declaration of belonging. The ceremony began with a display of light and sound, the alien women moving gracefully, their iridescent patterns shifting with rhythm and intent. Ethan observed closely, noticing the subtle cues and gestures that conveyed meaning and emotion. When it was his turn to contribute, he activated a series of water-light channels he had designed. Streams of glowing liquid traced elegant paths across the plaza, reflecting off crystalline walls and interacting with the women's patterns in a dazzling display. The crowd reacted with quiet awe, nods, and murmurs of approval. Ethan realized that his work had become more than practical. It had become a symbol of unity, collaboration, and creativity. Later, the women took him to a quiet garden where new innovations were being tested. Ethan had been experimenting with ways to combine the natural energy of the planet with sustainable technology to enhance lighting, communication, and food cultivation. The women listened attentively as he explained his ideas, their expressions shifting between curiosity and admiration. They asked questions, offered suggestions, and incorporated his thoughts into their own plans. It was a true partnership, one built on trust, respect, and shared vision. Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him here. When he first arrived, the alien women had been cold, distant, and even hostile. He had been isolated, mistrusted, and treated as a mere survivor of a crash. Yet, through patience, empathy, and consistent effort, he had transformed that perception. By learning their language, observing their culture, and contributing meaningfully, he had earned a place among them. The word ours was more than inclusion. It was a recognition of the bridge he had built between human ingenuity and alien society. In the days that followed, Ethan became increasingly involved in long-term planning for the settlement. He worked with the women to design sustainable structures that blended with the natural environment, optimize energy use from the planet's unique resources, and develop educational programs for younger members of the community. His contributions were valued not just for their practicality, but for the way they fostered harmony and cooperation. One afternoon, Ethan was approached by a group of younger women eager to learn from him. They asked about human techniques for observation, problem-solving, and creativity. Ethan smiled, guiding them through exercises in careful observation of the environment, encouraging them to explore ideas without fear of mistakes, and teaching them how to apply logic while respecting the balance of the alien world. He realized that this mentoring was perhaps one of his most meaningful contributions. Through teaching, he could ensure that the knowledge and principles he valued, curiosity, empathy, and collaboration, would continue to flourish in the community long after he was gone. Even the taller woman with the azure markings took part in these sessions, demonstrating her own curiosity and willingness to learn. She and Ethan would discuss new ways to cultivate food, enhance energy systems, and maintain the health of the planet's ecosystem. Their conversations were not dominated by hierarchy or authority. They were exchanges of ideas, mutual exploration, and shared problem-solving. It was in these moments that Ethan truly understood the depth of his acceptance and belonging. As the 10th year drew to a close, the settlement faced a challenge that would test the trust and collaboration that had been built over the years. A rare seasonal storm approached, bringing heavy rains and winds strong enough to shift the crystalline structures. The women mobilized quickly, preparing the settlement with Ethan's guidance. Together, they reinforced structures, diverted water flows, and safeguarded the community's crops and resources. The storm passed with minimal damage, a testament to their planning, teamwork, and the knowledge that had been carefully shared over the years. After the storm, the community gathered once more in the central plaza. The women expressed gratitude through gestures, sounds, and shared rituals, acknowledging Ethan's contributions not just as a human, but as a fully integrated member of their society. He felt a quiet pride, tempered by humility. The trust they had given him was not simply a reward, it was a responsibility, one he had nurtured carefully and would continue to uphold. Ethan spent evenings walking through the settlement, observing the daily rhythms of life. He noticed the younger women practicing skills he had taught them, the elders consulting with him about new ideas, and the creatures moving freely, unafraid, and thriving. The sense of harmony filled him with a profound satisfaction. This alien world, once hostile and unfamiliar, had become a place of connection, growth, and shared purpose. One evening, as the twin suns set, Ethan and the taller woman climbed a ridge overlooking the settlement. The sky was ablaze with colors reflecting off the crystalline groves, casting long, dancing shadows. She gestured broadly, encompassing the entire settlement, then pointed to Ethan, and finally made the circular motion that symbolized inclusion. Ethan understood completely. He was not merely accepted, he was claimed as part of their community. They did not just tolerate him, they valued him, trusted him, and considered him ours. Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had survived the crash, faced suspicion, and navigated a world entirely alien to him. Yet through patience, understanding, and consistent contributions, he had transformed fear into trust, isolation into belonging, and difference into partnership. Humanity had proven itself not through force or dominance, but through empathy, intelligence, and the willingness to connect and contribute. The days that followed were filled with celebration, collaboration, and quiet reflection. Ethan continued to teach, learn, and innovate, but now with the added weight of full inclusion. The alien women sought his counsel, shared their knowledge openly, and involved him in every aspect of their lives. They had embraced him as one of their own, and in return, he had embraced them, not as masters of survival, but as partners in life, growth, and understanding. The settlement flourished as a community built on shared respect and collaboration. Crops grew abundantly, water flowed efficiently, and the inhabitants moved with confidence and joy. The knowledge Ethan had shared continued to influence the daily lives of the women, ensuring that the principles of innovation, empathy, and cooperation would persist. The younger generation, inspired by his example, learned that intelligence, kindness, and persistence could bridge worlds, foster trust, and create lasting bonds. Ethan often walked through the crystalline groves alone, reflecting on his journey. The twin suns illuminated the shimmering flora, casting vibrant reflections that seemed to dance across the landscape. He marveled at how much he had learned from the alien women, and how much they had learned from him. Together, they had created a life that was richer, more vibrant, and more connected than either could have imagined alone. He had found something he never expected in those first terrifying moments after the crash. Not just survival, but a true sense of belonging. The word ours had grown from a quiet acknowledgement to a declaration of community, trust, and respect. It was a testament to the power of humanity's patience, empathy, and intelligence, a proof that even in a world light years away from home, connection and understanding could flourish. As night fell, Ethan gazed at the stars above, thinking of Earth and the life he had left behind. Yet there was no regret. He had found a new home, a new purpose, and a new family among the alien women who had once hated him. Together they had built something enduring, a society that thrived not on dominance, but on shared effort, mutual respect, and the quiet power of trust. And in that moment, standing on the ridge as the stars twinkled above the glowing crystalline groves, Ethan felt the profound truth of his journey. He was no longer a visitor, no longer an outsider. He belonged. He was theirs, and they were his. He was part of something greater, a living testament to the ability of humanity to connect, inspire, and belong, even in worlds far beyond its own. The alien women looked to him with quiet smiles, a wordless acknowledgement that echoed through the settlement. Ours. It was a word that carried warmth, respect, and shared history. It was a word that spoke of trust earned, bonds formed, and a future built together. And for Ethan, it was a word that finally made him feel truly at home.